So a part of your training for elk hunting season, you have to train your legs, and you have to train your shooting skills. Whatever you're using, archery equipment or a rifle, you have to train your legs. So you have to hike and prepare for the season. And the biggest, probably one of the biggest parts of preparing for your elk hunt is the scouting that you do. You cannot go into the forest by picking a spot on the map, Google Maps or Onyx, and just hoping that there's going to be an animal over there. Do not rely on your hope. Do not hope for luck. You cannot do that. You have to put in the work that it takes to scout the areas, that you want to hunt, to identify which canyons are you going to be hunting, which ridges are you going to be focusing on. Have you determined and identified the staging areas, the rutting grounds? Have you found hot zones where you know the elk are going to be during September, during the rut? If you have not done any of those things, then all you're doing is you're relying on luck and hope, and those things do not lead to success. Because if you put in the work beforehand, you will be successful. But if you just rely on luck, you will not be successful. That is why most hunters fail, is because they don't do their homework. They just pick a spot that looks good to them and go there on the opening morning, only to find out 10 trucks parked at a gate or 5 horse trailers, everyone already packed in, and they're already late to the game. You have to do your scouting before the season opens. June, July, August, early September, that is when you have to already put 100 miles with your boots. That is what I do, and that's what leads to my success. Before the season starts, I already ran 20 trail cameras in a 100-mile circle. I already identified the rutting grounds. I already picked my hot zones that I'm going to be focusing on for the rest of the season, because I know from the previous year, from the previous season, that's where the elk were. I found their sign. I looked and I found their trails. I found their bedding areas. I found where they eat, as well as I have identified their hot zone, is what I call it, in the rutting ground. There's specific pockets, small pockets, that will hold 10 to 20 elk in 1 week in September. Those are the pockets you have to find before the season starts. Because if you go on the opening day and all you did just picked a spot on a map, you picked an area on Onyx, and you're like, I'm gonna go over there, then for the first 3 days all you're doing is scouting. Like, you cannot afford to do that. You're burning gas, you're burning your precious vacation time, and you have not done the biggest part. The most important part of hunting is the research. It is the same thing. That is why I love elk hunting, because it is the same thing like running a business. Before you start a business, you have to do the market research. You have to identify who your client is going to be. You have to figure out how you're going to communicate to them. How are you going to find them? Do they even need your product? Same thing in elk hunting. You have to identify the areas. You have to identify and find those spots that are going to hold elk. You have to prepare. You have to do the research. Run some trail cameras. Go hiking. Put in 100, 200 miles before the season starts. That is what's going to lead to your success. Not just picking a spot on the map. Just completely uneducated guess and hoping that there's going to be elk over there. Same thing. That's why businesses fail, because all they do is they hope, oh, I want to start a business and I hope somebody is going to buy my product. Instead, you can do some research. You can at least validate your idea and see if people want that product or that service in that area, and how are you going to find those clients. Same thing with elk hunting. You cannot. That is where most people fail. They fail before the season starts because they haven't done scouting. It is the biggest, the most important. You have to focus 80% of your effort on scouting and 20% on actual hunting. Because what happened with me last year, I scouted all summer and I was able to get a bull on the first day, on the opening day. Within 4 hours of my hunt, I was able to get a bull because I was at the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, communicating with elk, and I was able to connect. But that is where people fail. They start preparing on the first day of the hunt, whereas they had to prepare, you know, 2-3 months before, doing the research, scouting, preparing their legs, doing some training, figuring out what calling sequences are they going to use, where are they going to hunt, what terrain do they want to hunt. Because most people, they're like, oh, I'm going to hunt this unit over here. That unit is 50 by 200 or 50 by 20 miles. That is hundreds and hundreds of miles that you're like, oh, that's my unit, I can hunt anywhere. No, you cannot hunt the whole unit in one season. In fact, you cannot hunt the whole unit in 5 years. So you have to pick a smaller area. And how do you do that? You go out there and you find, in that unit, you find an area that you're willing to hunt, an area that you know best, because that is going to be the area where you're going to have most success. An area that you know best, where to cross the rivers, which canyons to go into, which ridges to climb, where do elk go through. Put up some cameras and see what you're gonna get, because in some places I set up 3-4 cameras and in a month I don't get anything. I know that's an area I don't want to spend, you know, my season hunting, because if I didn't get anything there in June, July, August, most likely I'm not gonna get anything there in September. So, but that is where people fail. They think they can hunt the whole unit, and on the first day they're gonna hunt here, on the second day they get disappointed, frustrated, there's hunting pressure, and they're like, oh, I'm gonna drive somewhere 25 miles away. They're wasting 4 hours again, breaking down their camp, setting it up again, driving over there. They're frustrated, and their frustration does not lead to making the right actions. And that is why I don't hunt many spots at the same time. I'm gonna hunt one spot for 4 days, obviously if I know there's elk in the area, because I have done my scouting. Then I'm gonna switch to another spot for 3-4 days. But if you're trying to hunt the whole unit, one day you're over here, then you're driving somewhere after lunch and hunting a different spot, man, that's so stupid. It's like you have a lot of doing, but you have absolutely no results, because you're not even giving yourself enough time to get to know 1 5x5 square miles. You're not giving yourself 5x5 is 25 square miles. That will take you 7 days to walk each canyon. That is insane. And that's like, if you just take one small area, if you take 5x5 square miles and spend 5 days over there, guaranteed you're gonna find elk. Guaranteed one elk is gonna walk through that canyon when you're gonna be bugling there, and you're gonna be able to call them in. But what guys do is they're gonna hunt here for 3 hours or half a day, then they want to drive somewhere else. They're gonna hunt over there, especially in Oregon and Washington. There's so many logging roads, and because that's where I hunt, that's where I spent the last 15 years hunting. And believe me, that's what I did for the first 10 years. That's how I hunted. 2 days before the hunting season opens, I'm gonna start scouting, but that's nothing. That's just getting to know the trailheads and the gates, instead of getting to know the terrain and the animals and the herds and the herd populations, how many bulls per cow ratios there are. Now I know all of that before the season starts. I know which bulls are going to be walking through that area, not at what time, but I know a rough estimate of how many elk are going to be in that one canyon in that 1 week. So, but that's where most people fail. They don't want to do the research beforehand. So